Hi everyone, welcome back to our AI in Action Building with Copilot Studio series. Connectors in Microsoft Power Platform are proxies or wrappers around APIs that allows you to connect your accounts and use a set of pre-built actions and triggers. You can use connectors for your custom copilots with Microsoft Copilot Studio. In this episode, I'll share how to add standard, premium, and custom connectors to your copilots. Let's dive into it. In our first episode, Gomo shared how to create a copilot using natural language. This time round, I'll use a preview feature of templates. I'll select the weather template, which uses a standard connector. This weather copilot will provide me with a weather forecast for a location. I need to connect to the MSN weather connector in order for my copilot to interact with the API services that provide weather forecast information. I'll select the ellipsis icon followed by selecting Edit. My user account will then be used for authentication when I select Confirm. The status of the connector will now show as connected as a connection reference was created behind the scenes using my user account. I'll select Create and Copilot Studio will set up my copilot. Once the setup is complete, I can scroll down and review the topic and actions that are already configured with the template. We can see there are 3 actions already added, which are pre-built actions of the MSN Weather connector. Let's test one of these actions. In the testing pane, I'll select the suggestion of questions to ask. I'll select, what is the forecast for today? Next, you'll see the copilot ask me for an input parameter value that's required by the Get Forecast for Today action. I'll enter the city of Auckland, and in a matter of seconds, we'll see a response return that summarizes the forecast. Notice how the measurement system used for temperature is imperial as it's displaying as Fahrenheit. In New Zealand, we use metric where temperatures are provided in Celsius. I can change the input parameter setting by editing the action. I'll select inputs and I'll scroll down to the units and change the value from I to C, where C represents the metric measurement system. I'll then save and retest my copilot. I'll refresh the testing pane and I'll select the same question again, followed by entering the same city. We'll now see the response returned as metric where the temperature is in Celsius. Next up, we have premium connectors. I'll use the AI Builder connector again, which I covered in the previous episode. I'm going to add a prompt action by using the email campaign prompt from our prompts library. I've already created this prompt action where I've already added sample data for the input parameters, and I've also tested the prompt. Let's add my prompt as an action to my custom copilot in Copilot Studio. In my custom copilot, I navigate to the Actions tab and select Add an Action. I'll then select my prompt from the list of actions. I next need to configure the inputs by adding them to the action. I'll scroll down and with the Inputs tab selected, I'll select Edit. I can then add my 3 input parameters that I define in my prompt, which are campaign length, product, and segments. I'll let Copilot dynamically fill in the input, and I'll leave the display name and description as is. I next need to configure my output, so I'll go back and I'll select the Outputs tab, followed by selecting Edit. I'll tick the Respond to the user after running this action checkbox so that we can see a response return from the prompt action after it's succeeded. I'll let AI dynamically create the message for me, otherwise I have the option to create a specific message or an adaptive card. This action is now configured, so I'll select Finish. Before I test, I need to update the generative AI settings where I select the generative option so that my action can be called. I'll select the conversational map in the testing pane so I can confirm in real time that my prompt action is called. I'll enter a question where I'll ask for a 6-week email campaign for the Surface laptop targeting university students. I can see in real time that my prompt action was called and that the input variables are filled in using generative AI. I can also review the outputs returned from the AI Builder connector. Finally, I can review the email campaign that was generated where AI was used to dynamically create this message using the text output of the response. Finally, let's dive into custom connectors. Here I have an ASP.NET application that has a single GET method request, which allows users to get order details from an order number. As a developer, I can use connected services within Visual Studio to create custom connectors by setting up a connection with Power Platform. After selecting the target Power Platform environment to create the custom connector in, select the plus icon to create a new custom connector. The final step is to create a public dev tunnel to allow debugging of actions in Copilot Studio for testing purposes. The dev tunnel allows me to locally test the code of the custom connector on my machine prior to deploying it into Azure. For the dev tunnel settings, I'll provide a name. I can also configure the URL to remain the same or have it changed each time the tunnel is launched. And lastly, I can configure the tunnel to be public or private. I'll select Finish, and the custom connector will be created in the selected Power Platform environment. I'll select the green triangle icon to launch the dev tunnel in a browser. We can see the single get method request, and I can also perform a quick test to ensure my ASP.NET application works with the dev tunnel by entering the required input parameter of order number. A response is returned with the order details as defined in the code. Let's next add the custom connector as an action to my custom Copilot in Copilot Studio. I use the store operations template, and I'll turn off the track order topic that came with it, as I'm going to replace it by adding a new action using my published custom connector. In the Actions tab, select Add an Action. I can then search for my custom connector by entering the name of the action. I'll select the action, and I'll enter a description for the connector. By providing a description for the connector, I'll know which connector to authenticate when I later test it. As we scroll down, we'll see the details of my custom connector, including the description, which has already been populated based on the description of the Swagger operation in my code. Next, we'll see the input and outputs, which are once again defined in the code, where the input of the request is the required parameter of order number, and the outputs are the properties that represent the order details returned in the response. The final step is to review before selecting Finish to add the action to the custom Copilot. Before I test, a couple of updates need to be made. I need to define how the response will be displayed to the user in the output settings of the action, where I select the respond to the user after running this action checkbox. And once again, I'll use AI to dynamically create the message for me. Next, I need to make sure that the generator setting is enabled in order for Copilot to call the action of my custom connector. I'm now ready to test my Copilot. I'll select the conversational map so we can see in real time how Copilot is calling my action. Now, before I test my Copilot back in Visual Studio, I'm going to enter a breakpoint in the code so I can debug the request. I'll also launch the dev tunnel so I can proceed with testing the code locally on my machine. I'll ask my Copilot a question about my order details. I can see that my custom connector action has been called, but I need to authenticate my connection for the custom connector. I can review the connections page by selecting Connect. This will list connections for all actions that I need to configure for my Copilot. When I select the hyperlink in the Actions column, it tells me more information about the connector, which includes the description I entered earlier for my connection. This lets me know the purpose of this connection, which is super useful in the scenario when there are many connections for my Copilot and I've forgotten what they are for. I'll next select Connect and then select Submit to authenticate with the custom connector. I can then retest my Copilot, and this time I can see in real time that I haven't provided the required input parameter of order number. Once the order number is entered, the debugger kicks in, which allows me to step into the code and see what's happening. I'll select F5 on my keyboard and the code will continue to run. The response of the order will then be generated using AI based on the outputs. This is an example of how developers can create a custom connector from their code using Visual Studio Connected Services with Power Platform. To see all of the connectors available in Power Platform, in the Power Automate Maker portal, select More, then select Discover All, followed by selecting Connectors. Here, you'll see all of the connectors available and which ones are standard and which ones are premium. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the description down below for further links. Please subscribe to our Power Platform YouTube channel so that you get notified of when our next AI in Action Building with Copilot Studio series is posted. See you next time. Bye!